Joe can't open up to Gail and tell her what happened because he can't let her know about Ellie. He can't talk about her immunity, and that's why they were going to the hospital and why they were going to carry out that medical procedure on her. So, therefore, he can't open up about what he did in its fullest or why he did it. We can also perhaps frame Joel's problems partly around the acts of commission, i.e., taking out so many people, and potentially an act of omission of potentially saving other people through Ellie's immunity and any moral injury that might surround that for him. For effective therapy, all of that likely needs to be acknowledged. So that leaves him in a bit of a quandary. Does he trust Gail enough to tell her? Unlikely. There's therapist client confidentiality to consider. There's no professional body to report her to if she breaches that. It does wreck her therapeutic relationship with him and potentially any other clients she might have in the future. So there's that further consider. But is Ellie's immunity such a big deal that she's willing to do that? And the reason I'm making this video is because similar things come up in real life therapy. There are times when the client doesn't want to disclose something to the therapist. So, what do we actually do in these situations? Well, we can spend some time building trust, we can create a safe space and relationship, but that might take loads of time. And now, taking a long time isn't inherently a problem, but sometimes we are confined by finances or limited sessions provided by an insurance provider or by the service that you're seeing the person in. Well, there is something else we can do, and this is how I would do it through my training as an EMDR practitioner. I'm not sure how relevant this is to other modalities out there, though, outside of EMDR. So we actually have this thing called blind to therapist EMDR protocol. And this was developed by Bloor and Homeshaw in 2009. We can see some information here from Springer Publishing in this research article called The Development and Uses of the Blind to Therapist EMDR Protocol. This isn't a deep dive into this. This is just for me to give you a really quick overview so you can have some understanding that this thing is out there and is something that can be used in case it helps you out somehow. So the protocol was actually developed to circumvent client unwillingness to describe traumatic memory content. So in other words, for various reasons, the client doesn't want to describe out loud to the therapist what their traumatic memory is. We can see here at least 6 reasons of why that might be the case. And I say at least because everyone's individual, but this just gives an overview of why some people might want to do this. So you can see some obvious ones here. Shame and embarrassment. This is one I come across all the time. The experience that happened to the person has filled them with shame, or they feel so embarrassed by it, they just don't want to say it to the therapist. They don't want to describe what happened. They don't want to tell the therapist what happened. Fine, we can work with that. Minimizing potential for vicarious traumatization. So that's because sometimes clients think that they may traumatize the therapist by telling them what happened. And you can see the others here. I'm not going to go through all of them. There isn't one for I was saving a child who was going to be operated on without her consent because she could potentially save humanity and she could essentially save the world from a deadly infection. So, what you need to know, I think, as a potential client, perhaps, or if you're an EMDR therapist in training or thinking about doing EMDR training, is that what we do in EMDR is we come up with target images. So, we come up with a memory that the person has of their traumatic experience. Now, usually the person would tell us what that memory is. So, they saw this, they experienced this happened to them, and this is what they remember about it. And the therapist and the client would both know what they were talking about. But what we can do is the client can think of what happened to them in their head, know what their experience is, and they can just call it A. And then if there's any more, they can call it B and C. So they can just refer to that to the therapist and say, okay, we're working on target image A. We don't need to know any more than that. Because the thing with the MDR is, it's the person with the experience that's doing the healing. we're allowing their brain to process the experience, to process the memory. And the reason that works is because in EMDR and the model that underpins it is the brain is capable of healing itself if you give it the right environment to do so. So we are allowing the person to bring their experience to mind in order to process it. We are helping them through that processing, but we don't need to know what it is. We don't need to know the detail. The client doesn't need to tell us. They just need to be able to hold it in their head. And we need to be able to, as a therapist, be alongside them as they do that and guide them through the process, guide them through the EMDR process. I'm not going to go into detail how. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the model itself. I might save that for a video on my therapy channel. So if you're not, shameless plug here, if you're not subscribed to my therapy channel, I'll drop a link. Go and subscribe to it because it's loads of trauma stuff coming up. So the blind to therapist protocol can be particularly helpful for clients who feel shame, fear, or discomfort around sharing certain traumatic events. It's pretty cool because it empowers the client to maintain their privacy while still accessing the full therapeutic benefit that EMDR offers. And the research tells us, and my own clinical experience backs this up, that it can be just as effective as standard EMDR because the brain is still able to reprocess and reintegrate the memory even without that verbal disclosure. I just wanted to make this video to get it out there that it is possible to do trauma work or trauma processing or memory processing or trauma therapy without having to tell the therapist what's happened, what the experience was, what the memory is. We don't need to know. We can work without that. If Gail was an EMDR therapist, then she might be able to do that. Of course, she would need to know that Joel was actually holding something back and didn't want to tell her. But I think it's pretty clear. Any tuned in therapist, any attuned human being can probably tell that. So maybe that would be an option. I don't know. I'm just being really mega geeky and probably overthinking about things as I usually do. But there you go. Bit of information there for you. Hope you found it interesting. See you later.